Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to our church service today. We love that we get a chance to be with you online. You're going to get the most out of today by pairing this broadcast experience with our app. So take a moment, download the app, and explore the features that you can use to follow along, like a response card, notes section, and Bible. If you want to be a part of the movement at Grace Church and further the work that God's doing through services just like this one, you can give right on our website or through your app. It's easy, safe, and quick.
Well, good morning. It is good to see all of you. I'm glad that you are here. I have a question for you right off the bat this morning. Have you ever seen this scenario play out in real life? This week, we were traveling around, and my daughter and my wife were somewhere, and so the boys and I, we had to run errands, and while we were running errands, we stopped and we got a little bit of a treat. And when we went to pick up my daughter and my wife, my daughter got into the car, and immediately she gave that look to our boys because of the treats that they got. And so she quickly tried to grab it away from her brothers, and then an all-out brawl ensued inside of our vehicle, right? In living color. That's because kids covet stuff. Kids want to have things, right? But we adults, we don't covet, right? We don't ever give that kind of a look when someone else has something that we want. Well, of course we do. Maybe it's related to a new car that someone has, or a job that someone got, or the kind of house that someone has. Or maybe it's an outfit and you wonder, man, how much did they pay for that? I wish I could have had that. And maybe we don't throw ourselves down in the middle of the candy aisle at the store and throw a fit. But I bet we give that look deep inside of our soul when we see someone else with something that we want. We all struggle with that, and we would say in our minds, maybe even try to justify it, I just gotta have it. I gotta have that. That's why advertisers spend so much money trying to convince us of that. In 2017, there was $206 billion spent trying to convince you and me that we didn't have enough, trying to convince us to compare their ice cream with our nothing. And they're very successful at it. Marketers know that when we compare our lives with other people's, we'll end up buying their product, even if we don't actually need it. Because discontentment isn't a marketing strategy. We're likely to spend more cash that way. And listen, comparing with other people never delivers happiness. We know that. This is a basic truth, right? Yet we constantly compare with other people. We compare ourselves and what we have and what we want with what they have. And comparison kills contentment. Comparison kills contentment. Theodore Roosevelt said it this way: comparison is the theft of joy. It's the theft of joy. The joy that I would have that what I have is enough. The things that God has blessed me with is good. Comparison ruins that. It's like a story I heard the other day of a guy who was walking along the shores of a beach, and a bottle washed up, and he picked up the bottle, and a genie popped out. And you know kind of how this goes, right? He gets 3 wishes, and the genie says, you get 3 wishes, but be careful, because your worst enemy is going to get 2 times the amount that you wish for. And he didn't think much of it, and so he was trying to put together which wishes he would go for. And the first one, he said, okay, fine, I want $1 million. And poof, $1 million appeared right at his feet. But then the genie gave him a vision of his worst enemy, and poof, $2 million appeared at his worst enemy's feet. And he kind of didn't like that. So he's thinking about the second wish. He goes, I want to have the largest diamond in the world. And poof, this huge rock appears at his feet, and he's excited about it. But then he sees his worst enemy gets 2 of the world's largest diamonds. And he's kind of fit with jealousy, and he's seeing he's got twice as much money and twice as much jewelry now as I have. And so he thought about it, and he decided, okay, I know. 3rd wish, I figured it out. I want you to scare me half to death, okay? Some of you will get that by the time you drive out today. But anyway, comparison kills contentment. One author said it like this: we have to learn to love our life, not their life. God wants us to experience a joy and a happiness and a contentment with all of the blessings that we have. And that's the heartbeat behind this 10th and final commandment this morning. Moses, writing the 10 Commandments, says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, or his ox or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Basically, the 10th commandment is this: do not covet. Do not covet. Now, we don't hear and use that language a whole lot these days. It's not something we hear every day. But this commandment, when you stop and you think about it, is a very internal commandment. It's about our desires and our wishes and our wants and how we can control them. And it's really awfully impossible to keep 100% of the time. Comparing kills contentment, and it results in coveting. The question really is, what is coveting? Okay, well, here's a pretty simple definition. Coveting is wanting to have what doesn't belong to you. It's deep in your soul desiring something that doesn't belong to you. Like that opening picture, that girl wanted the ice cream cone, right? And all of us are guilty of coveting. Let me say that again. All of us are guilty of wanting something that doesn't belong to us. Really, it's a very simple message, isn't it? And maybe when you look at these 10 timeless commandments, you start to think, well, I'm kind of past that point in life. Can I just tell you something? Beware of the man or the woman that tells you that they are beyond these commandments, because they are not. None of us are. As a matter of fact, the 10th commandment, if you go all the way back to the beginning with the first, they're the perfect bookend to the 10 commandments. In the first commandment, God said, have no other gods before me. And in the 10th commandment, this is the application of it. We've all wanted something that doesn't belong to us. Maybe it's something material and it's a possession, or it's a relationship that we wish we had, or maybe it's just a preference. Something we think should be the way we want it to be. Maybe it's even good. And so we don't get our own way, we don't get what we want, and so we covet. The truth is, everyone has compared what I have with what I want. And that's coveting. And God tells us that when we covet, we miss his best. Jesus in the New Testament, the Gospel of Luke chapter 12, he expanded this and he said, hey, listen, beware of coveting. You're going to have to go on the offense. You're going to have to fight comparison. You're going to have to go to work to keep this thing deep inside of you at bay. And when you don't, it brings in a ton of consequences. Some you don't even think about, probably. So I want to share with you an example that's going to kind of set the pace for the rest of this talk on the consequences that coveting brings. And it comes from the book written by C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. He gives 2 pictures about how ethics work out in humanity. And these pictures are going to help us frame the consequences of coveting, okay? The first picture he gives is of a fleet of ships. Okay? A fleet of ships that are sailing, and this is what he writes. The voyage will only be a success in the first place if the ships don't collide and they don't get in one another's way. And secondly, if each ship is seaworthy and has their engines in good order, right? And so he says, listen, this isn't going to work, these ships going out in a military fashion, whatever their job may be, if the ships aren't staying afloat, and if they don't get any, or if they get in each other's way, that's not going to work. They have to stay afloat, and they have to stay out of each other's way. That's his first picture. The second picture that he gives is of a band, or of an orchestra, right? And if you've ever been to a 5th grade band or orchestra concert, this is going to make sense to you in a little bit, right? He writes this, he says, each player's individual instrument must be in tune And also, each must come in at the right moment to combine with all the others, which doesn't happen at a fifth grade band and orchestra concert, right? Everybody kind of plays out of tune and in different times because they're still learning. Your instrument has to be in tune, and you have to come in at the right time in order for the music to make sense. And so there's individual responsibility and staying in our lane. Those are the two requirements for ethics to work in our society. But Lewis says that's just two things. But there's a third that we often forget about. We have not asked, where are the ships going? We have not asked, what song are we actually playing? And unless we know the destination of the ship, or we know the score of the song, we can't call it success. And so really, he says there's three parts to a societal ethic: harmony between individuals, harmony inside individuals, and the purpose of life. And the 10th commandment is concerned about all three of those working together. So with that as a picture, I want to share with you three consequences of coveting that happen in our lives. Okay, if you're a note taker, I'm going to write these down. Here's the first consequence. Coveting dishonors people. It dishonors people. I remember when I was in middle school band, there was the first concert where someone was going to be given a solo, and it was on the instrument that I was playing, and so a number of us tried out for it, and we didn't get it. And this one girl got it, and we couldn't really stand her, to be honest, and we were all frustrated about it, and we all coveted the spotlight. And so we started talking behind the scenes about sabotaging the experience, that when she got out there, we could all play out of tune and kind of play over her and mess up the song a little bit so that she didn't get what we wanted. Now, we didn't follow through with that, but you see the point. You know, each of us have a chance, have a desire to have what someone else wants, or someone else has, to want what someone else has. It belonged to her. God tells us in Exodus chapter 20, verse 17, that we should not covet anything. When we covet what belongs to our neighbor, it causes the ships to collide together. It causes the people to come in at the wrong spot, and the music doesn't make sense anymore. And God says, no, I want there to be peace between people. And coveting threatens that peace. Remember earlier in the series we said Jesus summarized all 10 of these commandments into two categories, right? Love God and love people. Love God and love your neighbor. Don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't murder, don't lie, and don't covet. Those can all be summarized with the words of Paul in Romans chapter 13. Love your neighbor as yourself. Our neighbor isn't just the person that lives next to us. Jesus expanded this to be any person. And our attitude towards people is to be love. And it's awfully hard to truly love someone who's standing in the way of you getting what you want. We are to be people of love who tear down walls between people. Coveting builds walls between people. That's why Paul told us in Romans chapter 12, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. How do you respond when your neighbor gets a brand new car and you kind of wish, man, why don't I deserve that new car? How do you respond when your neighbor gets a new car and then gets in a fender bender with it? Is there just a little bit of involved? See, a spirit of comparison will cultivate the idea of coveting. It drives a wedge between people. When was the last time you got excited when someone else got what you really wanted? When they got the new phone, when they got the job? God expects us to be excited when other people get things. He wants us to celebrate that and rejoice. He wants us to tear down walls with love, not build them up with comparison. Coveting, it builds a barrier between people. And so it dishonors the relationship. That's one of the consequences. Here's a second consequence of coveting. It diverts our worship. It diverts our worship. Comparison and coveting opens you up to a complete and dangerous downfall. Think of King David in the Bible. This guy, it all started with coveting, and everything went down from there. He's standing on his rooftop one day looking out, and he sees something that doesn't belong to him, another man's wife. And he sees her taking a bath, and he's like, I gotta have that. And so he covets his neighbor's wife, and then it led to adultery. And then to steal her from him, he goes ahead and murders her husband and then lies to cover it up. All along, he's dishonoring the name of his family and the name of God, and she had become a counterfeit God to him. 9 of the 10 commandments right there. Boom. The result was that he didn't get God's best there. This internal drive to want what doesn't belong to us, to want more than what we have. There's the myth of more. That if I get more money, if I get more of this, if I get more fame, if I get more power, if I get more what I want and what I think is right, then it'll be good. That becomes our God. For David, it was all because he saw someone that didn't belong to him. And in that moment, she became his God. He was expecting her to fulfill him. And so he directed all of his affection and all of his attention onto someone that wasn't God. And in Exodus chapter 20, God gives us a very specific breakdown of places where we might be tempted to make counterfeit gods, to give worth or weight to things that aren't meant to have it. Whether it's our neighbor's house, or wife, or servant, or ox or donkey, or just anything. All of these can be places where inside of ourselves, we're drawn to those things because we really, really, really want to have them. We think we got to have it. It's kind of like the game of life. Maybe you've played this with your children or your grandchildren where you just spin the wheel. You sit down with 4 or 5 people at a table. You spin the wheel and move the car around, the board. And if from the very beginning, the goal is to be the wealthiest, richest person at the end of the game. And so you're comparing constantly the entire time who has more. You might think of like at the beginning of the game, you have to choose a house to live in, right? Are you going to end up in the big old mansion or in the rickety broken down house, And so when you draw the cards and when you play with your kids, like the one that ends up with the lowest house, they're kind of disappointed. See, keeping up with the Joneses has been around for a long time. God said, do not covet your neighbor's house. A bigger house with more square footage? A newer house with greater amenities? A Victorian mansion? A split level? A trailer? And then you're in the game of life and you spin again and eventually everybody ends up getting married. And so you put the opposite color person in the car. Maybe you're not married and you really want to be. And that's something that you don't have that you desperately want. Maybe you're married. And you want the person in the other seat to be more like someone else's spouse. That's what you really want. Comparison kills contentment. It makes you covet. It leaves you short. Or maybe there's like servants. And in our context, we don't really necessarily have any servants. Your neighbors probably don't have servants, but I bet they have great appliances and power tools that do work for them. Or then he says an ox or a donkey. Now, if your neighbor has a donkey, I'm sorry in general. But in Moses' day, that represented income. In the board game, you want to be the doctor who has all of the money. You want to land in the mansion, man. You want to have it all. You don't want to have the small, I think it's the $10,000 or $20,000 salary. You want to have the hundreds of thousands of dollars salary. Right? You want to have it all. And you don't want anybody else to have that. And then Moses says, anything. In case I miss something in the list. You can covet abilities, you can covet marriages, you can covet clothes or bank accounts. Or someone's kids. And then it becomes a fill-in-the-blank kind of a game. right? Why can't my fill in the blank be like theirs? Why can't my kids be like theirs? They always behave. You know what? They don't. Whoever's kid you're thinking of, they really don't. Or why can't my spouse be like that one? Or why can't our house be like this? We do this all the time. And advertisers are so good at reminding us that we should, and we really shouldn't. It drives a wedge between people, and it diverts our attention from the Creator to the creation. It's because comparison never leads to fulfillment. And fulfillment can't be found in created things. Author John Dixon said it this way: the more I find fulfillment in the Creator, in knowing His ways, in trusting His mercy, and relying on His guidance, the less I will covet the things of creation. The psalmist said it this way. He said, take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. The Message Bible says it this way: keep company with God. Get in on the best. You want the best? It only comes in knowing the Creator. But when we abandon the Creator, we try to gather and accumulate a whole bunch of other smaller created things in hope that they will somehow collectively have some meaning and merit that overrides the missing meaning that we have in our life. Coveting leads to counterfeit gods. It's one of the biggest consequences. It dishonors people, our ships collide. It diverts our worship, our ships sink. But there's one more consequence, and that's that coveting discredits character. It discredits character. When you first think of this, okay, so I'm not supposed to want anything that belongs to somebody else, and I'm trying to figure out how to do that in my life. You start thinking about the 10 Commandments in a way that they're kind of like rungs on a ladder, that if I do these, then God will approve of me. That is not how the 10 Commandments work. Remember, earlier in the series, you said the 10 Commandments were given to the people of God after they had been rescued from slavery from the Egyptians. The 10 Commandments are not rungs on the ladder that we keep in order to be rescued. They are a response of already having been rescued. And there's a big difference. And it begs the question, what do you really, really want? What is your deepest desire? God is telling us, hey, listen. Happiness doesn't come by getting what you want. It's found in wanting what you have. Or, as Paul told his apprentice Timothy in 1 Timothy 6, godliness with contentment is great gain. I love this next verse. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. Contentment requires an understanding of the purpose of life. It requires understanding that the conductor has a plan for the music and the commander has a destination for the fleet. Coveting forgets God's goodness to me and all the blessings that He's given me, and it fails to trust His plan with all that He's given me. But contentment, that cultivates a deeper character that's inside our heart and that can trust God and say, I see what they got, but I know what I have. And there's the myth of needing more, and there's the truth of having more than enough. And right here, we get to the core, the absolute center of the message of the 10 Commandments. This reveals to us a problem that we have. We have all of these commandments, this 10th one that seems virtually impossible to keep, that there would never be a moment in my life where I would ever want to have something that someone else has. It's impossible. For a point. that you and I are 100% incapable of keeping these. We are 100% incapable of being perfect. You're not perfect, and I am definitely not perfect. No one can keep God's expectations. We're all guilty of missing His standard. We get, no, we can never reach it on our own. And so we would be forced to say what the Apostle Paul said. He said, I am a sinner. Someone that has missed the standard and missed the mark. I couldn't perfectly keep all of these things. So I understand that I am a flawed person. Listen, I am a flawed man. And I have a desire to go my way rather than God's way. And the Ten Commandments, man, they shine this bright old light on that, don't they? I mean, if by chance there's someone out there that you've listened to these last 10 weeks and you think you're doing pretty good and you're okay on your own, man, you have missed the mark. They shine a bright light on the fact that we can't be perfect. As a matter of fact, that's the effect they had on God's people originally. In Exodus 20:18, one verse after the Ten Commandments are given, you might notice what it says. It says, all the people stayed at a distance. There was God in these commandments, and then there was us, the sinner that's flawed. And we stayed at a distance. That's because sin separates us from God. But that's only half the story. That's only half the story. We are flawed. We are sinners, very true. But oh, are you loved? Oh, are you loved? These timeless commandments reveal that we can't keep the standard, but that someone else has rescued us from it. We have been rescued through that death of Jesus Christ in our place. He died on our behalf. He lived a sinless life to be the perfect sacrifice, the one that met the standard. And here's something really cool. The Gospel of Matthew chapter 27, verse 50. When Jesus was on the cross and He died a sacrificial death in our place, do you know what happened? In Jesus' day in the temple, they put a veil between the Holy of Holies, the presence of God, and everyone else. And as soon as Jesus died, Matthew chapter 27 says the veil was torn in pieces. That veil was there as a representation to say, stay at a distance. I am God and you are not. And when Jesus died, the veil was removed. Instead of saying, stay at a distance, He said, come near to me through what my Son has done for you. And then you can say exactly the words of what the Apostle Paul said when he said, thanks be to God who delivers us through Jesus Christ our Lord. We have victory. I am a sinner. I am flawed, but oh man, am I loved because of what Jesus did for me. That is the message of these commandments. And that means that Jesus is the basis of our character. You are not good on your own. I am not good on my own. But when I surrender to His love and His grace, the Spirit of God takes residency in my life, and He produces character. Christ follower, this is the character that the Apostle Paul gave us in Galatians chapter 5. Ready? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Paul says right after that, against such there is no law. Jesus fixes the gap between the fact that we can't keep these commandments and perfection. We don't need a law to produce character. That's the problem with it. We need grace And only God's grace and His mercy and His love can produce the kind of character that we need. Coveting discredits your character. Contentment cultivates real character. Because when you're content, that's not natural. That's supernatural. And it's from God. And so the bottom line is these consequences are pretty significant. They build walls in our relationships with people, and so they dishonor them. They take our focus and our attention off of the one true God, and so it diverts our worship. And it discredits our character. See, God wants us to have a peace with Him. He wants us to have a peace that's within. And He wants us to experience a peace with other people. That's His purpose of these timeless commandments. And that peace gives us contentment. When you've surrendered to it, you become a very content person. And contentment is the opposite of coveting. See, contentment makes me grateful for and generous with what I have. Contentment drives my attention back to the things I have and the blessings that I have. And it makes me view them differently in light of God's goodness. And it makes me thankful for them, but it also makes me very generous with them. And so today I want to invite you to discover how to have real contentment. You find that in understanding who you are. You are a flawed person. You are a sinner. I am too. But oh man, are you loved. You are loved by God, who offers you forgiveness for the fact that you've sinned and a brand new clean slate in life. And He's inviting you to receive His forgiveness as a free gift. It's not rungs on a ladder where you have to do a bunch of good to earn it. You can't. It's choosing to receive it as a gift. It's free. And maybe for you today, that's a step you need to take. Just like the testimony that we heard a few minutes ago in baptism, someone who is going public with the fact that they have taken this step to experience the life-changing grace of Jesus Christ. And if that's you, I want to invite you to find on this card, the circle on the front, it says, "Today I receive God's love and forgiveness for me through Jesus Christ." I would love for you to check that box, and we'll contact you this week and help you figure out what your next steps are. When we experience contentment, that makes us genuinely grateful for what we have. We brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing from it, but we have to reprogram ourselves to be grateful for the things that we have. In an age of comparison, contentment's hard, and so we have to purposely think thankful. And maybe you're struggling with the myth of more and you're struggling to think thankful. I just want to encourage you. We've done this throughout our history more recently, but I want to encourage you again. 7 days, write down 7 things that you're thankful for the next week. Get to 50. Can you name 50 things you're thankful for this summer? How God has blessed you to make you grateful. If you're willing to take on that challenge, just write grateful on that response card. But it's not just being grateful for what we have. When I understand all that God's given me and what I have, I'm then generous with it. I'm willing to share. Maybe that's your next step, to be more and more generous with what you have. When you give away what you have for the sake of eternity, it's an amazing investment that yields rewards you'll never even fully know until you get to the other side. You might want to take the step of giving. Maybe you're not giving, and that's your next step. You can write giving on your response card. We'll help you. Maybe you are giving, and you're like, you know what? I need to go to the next level because I got to think thankful. I want to be generous with what I have. Maybe it's not just money. Maybe it's with your time. Maybe it's with your skills and the things that God has blessed you with. Listen, when you give of your time and your resource and your talents to the church of Jesus, lives are changed. Lives are absolutely changed. Did you know that because you gave faithfully, 100 students and 26 adults were on mission this summer, and over 50 people gave their lives to Jesus Christ because of it? when you give, it makes a difference. And when you give above and beyond and sacrificially, you're practicing the idea of contentment. So I just want to say, thank you. Thank you for when you give. Thank you for when you give of your time. Thank you for when you give of your talent to make a difference for the sake of eternity. Would you bow your heads with me this morning? God, I thank you for these 10 timeless truths. God, we want to be people who are grateful for what we have and generous with what we have. God, we're a people that would stand before you today, and we know we are not perfect. But oh man, are we loved. And God, I'm going to admit to you that there are days where the person that needs to hear that message the most is me. That I am flawed and that I am loved. And God, I'm convinced there are people listening to this message this morning that need to hear that. That it is only by your grace that we can stand. God, thanks for this journey this summer through these timeless commandments. I pray, God, that we would be people who live content. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks for watching with us today. We hope it's been helpful and motivating to live the life God created you to have. Share with us your next step through your app, or use the app to ask questions or share a prayer request. You're always invited to join us on our campus for weekend services. Until next Sunday, though, have a great week.